Opportunities. Please welcome Josh Silverman, CEO Etsy, and interviewer Stephen Bertoni, Assistant Managing Editor, Founders, Forbes.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Josh, welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be here in Detroit.
It's a homecoming. You're a local boy.
Born and raised in Ann Arbor.
Love it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, it's been a roller coaster world for everything e-commerce. What's happening at Etsy right now? What's exciting?
It feels like it's a whole new generation for Etsy. For about 2 years, the world shut down tragically, and you couldn't travel, you couldn't dine out, and even if you wanted to shop online, people were out of stock or they couldn't ship. Etsy was one of the only places where you could reliably go and everything was functioning as normal. And as a result, millions of people shopped on Etsy for the first time, or for the first time in a long time. And to give some sense of scale, we had about 40 million buyers before the pandemic. We had almost 90 million buyers coming out of the pandemic. And the great news is they shopped on Etsy because they had to during the pandemic. They're coming back again and again because they want to now. So our opportunity now is, Etsy's been the place that you go if you couldn't find it anywhere else. I think we have an opportunity to be a starting point for commerce. I think the more the world consolidates around Amazon, the more they desperately want a true alternative to Amazon. And I think Etsy offers that.
Yeah. Show of hands or some whoops. How many people have shopped on Etsy here? How many people have sold on Etsy or created on Etsy? All right, we got the full thing. And we did a story a while back, a few months ago, and we touted Etsy as the anti-Amazon, as we were saying all these companies are fighting for speed and price. Tell me about what Etsy has to offer, because it's very different.
Yeah, I mean, if you sell something with a SKU number, you're competing head-to-head with Amazon, which means you've either got to sell it cheaper or ship it faster, and I wish you the best of luck. And there's always going to be need for stuff that you want to arrive fast, be cheap, and it'll end up in a landfill 2 minutes later. All the sort of forgettable commodities of life. But I also think there's a lot of special moments that matter. And for that, you want to buy from another human. You want it to be made just for you. You want it to express your sense of style. If you're giving it to someone else, you want to express your care for them. And that's uniquely Etsy.
And to do all that handmade stuff, it takes a ton of technology, a ton of AI. You always fascinate me with the data. Tell me what the behind all of this, handmade stuff from all over the world, shipping, what is the secret sauce tech-wise? You have a lot of tech entrepreneurs now. How do you make that all happen?
Yeah, our mission is keeping commerce human. And in order to be really human, we actually need to partner with machines. We call it being superhuman inside of Etsy. But to give you some sense of scale, there's almost 100 million things for sale on Etsy. It's a mind-boggling amount of things. So if you take just coasters, for example, there's 300,000 coaster sets for sale on Etsy. So if you sat in the middle of the University of Michigan Stadium and looked around, every seat would have 2 coasters. That's how many coasters we have. And so when you come to Etsy and search, we've got to somehow pick the 30 that make sense to be on the first page of search results. And that is something which is literally impossible for humans to do. But we're getting better and better with AI at understanding you and your taste, understanding what style this particular coaster represents, and then trying to create that love connection that puts you together with the coaster that's perfect for you.
What's the perfect coaster?
For me, I'd probably go Art Deco in my, not that my house is that Art Deco, but I think that would provide a really interesting contrast. And by the way, we have a lot of really cool vintage items on Etsy as well.
You should make some under 30 coasters. That'd be
Yeah.
great. This is interesting because obviously we're going through a very tough economic time right now. You've been through the ringer many times. You joined Etsy as an outsider CEO when the company was on the brink financially and culturally. I want to hear, this always fascinates me, the first day you come in to Etsy, new boss, the place is on fire around you. What do you do?
Well, I think organizing people around the fewest things that matter. So I didn't have a roadmap, a clear plan for how we were going to turn the company around, but I knew 2 things. I knew I had an idea of what I thought we stood for, which was not handmade, because handmade is kind of small, it's special. There's a bigger idea. When you talk to customers and really listen hard, Why is it that sellers want to sell on Etsy? Why is it that buyers want to buy on Etsy? It's because they crave something which expresses identity, which expresses a sense of specialness. And that felt like a bigger idea. And then what is the one metric that matters? For us, it's gross merchandise sales, which means the amount of sales our sellers made. It's not our revenue and it's not our profit, it's our sellers' success. That one metric is the metric that matters.
Like volume, how much stuff is being sold, basically.
It's the total volume sold on the platform every day, is what we call gross merchandise sales. That's really, in my mind, the size of the pie. And if that's growing, then our sellers and our buyers are succeeding. And if our sellers and buyers are succeeding, everything else is going to work. So on day one, I organized the team around this is the metric that matters. We were tracking, it's not that we didn't track metrics, but we tracked like 10 or 12. And if you're tracking 10 or 12 metrics, every employee in the company who has an idea can find an excuse why this idea might help that metric. And all of a sudden, you're working on what we call the worthwhile many. All of the really good ideas that make sense, and if you do all the good ideas that make sense, you're dead in the water, because there's way too many of them. Of the worthwhile many, you've got to get to the vital few. What are the fewest of those ideas that we need to do and do with excellence in order to succeed? And that going from the worthwhile many to the vital few is, I think, one of the most essential jobs of leadership. And it really requires, well, what is going to move GMS the most in the shortest amount of time? And if that's working, our customers are winning. And if our customers are winning, we'll earn the right to fix other things later or focus on other things later.
How do you kind of focus your team and the culture on those few things? Because you told me in the past, like when you came in, people had been working on these worthy many for like a year, and you had to go in and shut that down. How do you kind of say, like, all right, folks, like this is it. I know this is interesting too, but we have to be laser focused on these few things. How do you do that as a leader?
We shut down a lot. I mean, I'd say by the end of my 5th week, at least 60% of the company had entirely new jobs. And we'd shut down most of the things people were working on. And that was really hard. I mean, people had worked for a year or 2 or 3 on a passion project they really cared about that made sense. If it didn't make sense, it would have been easy. But these were good ideas that made sense. And shutting those down was really hard. So I think the first thing is organizing people around a mission that's bigger than themselves. Bigger than revenue, bigger than profit, bigger than because you like it. Why do we exist? Why are we here? We all could do anything with our time, right? So the idea that there's, at the time, 2 million sellers, now 5 million sellers who count on us every single day, and life's not easy out there for them. And they've got to do a lot of hard things every day just to get through. So it's incumbent upon us to do some really hard things. They need us to bring our A game every day. And that means making tough decisions, and that means making sacrifice. So can't we agree that we exist to serve them, and that's a bigger mission, and that's going to involve sacrifice? Second, then, I think it is the job of leadership to make some tough decisions, but to give people transparency around why. It's not arbitrary. We didn't shut your thing down just because I happen to think my thing is better than your thing. Nobody understands that. But can we agree that growing GMS is the thing that matters the most, that one metric overall? And once we do that, what's the case for which are the fewest things that are going to do that the most? And while that idea is a really cool idea, it isn't going to take effect. Really, our sellers won't feel it for 3 years. We had a lot of things which, if they go well 3 years from now, people will feel the benefit. And we didn't have the right to be investing a lot in things that were going to take 3 years. Our sellers needed us driving more sales for them tomorrow. And it turned out we had quite a good list of things that could have a very sizable impact tomorrow.
We have a lot of folks in this room who are entrepreneurs, founders, leaders, and for many of us, this is the first kind of big downturn we're going through. 2-part question. What advice would you give them for kind of managing their business in a downturn? And secondly, managing their own, mental wellness and stress level?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating time because normally you go through a recession about every 7 years. And we've now been a lot longer than that. So we have a lot of people, even in positions of leadership, who've never led through a recession before. Recessions happen, and so part of it is keeping perspective that another day will come. And I remember when I was running Evite in 1999 and then 2000, and we were the celebrated company in 1999, and then the tech bubble crash happened in March of 2000. And all of a sudden, we were the biggest idiots in the world for doing this internet thing, and the whole internet was a fad, and it was all going to go away. And I got caught up a little bit too much in that and panicked too much. And it was hard to see that another day will come, and the business we run actually adds a lot of value. And step one, does the business you run add value, and does it actually have an economic model that makes sense? And while those are obvious questions, there has been too much money out in the market, and sometimes the answer to that is no. But if you believe the answer to that is yes, and if you can demonstrate it to yourself, one, I think staying calm and recognizing that could be, if we enter a recession, a hard 18 to 24 months, but a new day will come. And then second, batten down the hatches. What are the fewest things we need to do that really add value to our customers? If we always center on our customers, the fewest things our customers care about the most, do those really, really well, and everything else can wait. I think if you do that, you can live to fight another day. The market comes back. And actually, many of the best companies in tech were built in 2003, 2004, 2005, when the capital had fled the market, when everyone else was in fear. The people who were intrepid really came out as the biggest winners of that next generation.
And then mentally, you've been CEOs of many companies, and you have to always make tough decisions, whether it's layoffs or just changing projects and canceling projects. How do you when you're home, how do you take care of yourself?
Such a good question, actually. So, I read this really interesting article by a general that's always resonated with me. He said, leadership requires conviction, and conviction requires contemplation. It's a job of a leader to make tough decisions. You need to make them rationally, you need to make them calmly, you need to make them very transparently so your team understands why. You need to be able to articulate why you're doing this. But if everybody's happy with every decision you're making, you're probably not making tough enough decisions. And so I find that having my weekends to go hiking, I like to be out in nature, that's what works for me. Everyone will have different things, but having time alone to just think turns out to be really important. So when I show up next week in the office, I have some conviction around a few of the most important things. Another thing in a smaller way that's been very helpful for my leadership is I require before every meeting that I have the materials 24 hours in advance. And I really block time every day to read and think about the materials for tomorrow. So I spend half of today preparing for tomorrow's meetings. What I find is when I walk into those meetings, then I have a very clear idea of what are the questions I have, who else needs to be in the room, what data do I need, and when making those decisions in the room, I have a lot more confidence that I'm not going to change my mind a week or a month later. There's nothing more frustrating than sitting with a leader having a decision made and then having them change their mind a month later. But what I was finding is, before I was really diligent and rigorous around pre-reads, I'd sit in a meeting, I'd make a decision, and then later I'd say, well, what about competitors that are doing something different? Well, what about Mary's opinion? She wasn't in the room. I didn't get to hear her voice, and she actually, I think, would have a really valuable perspective. So, and then it was too late. So really making sure that we've organized that before I make a decision, I find very helpful.
We only have 2 minutes left, unfortunately, but I want to hear, the world of retail, the world of e-commerce has just, sped forward in the last few years. What is the cutting edge right now? Like, what are you most excited about? Maybe Etsy, maybe in general, and give me 1 or 2 things that's going to blow our minds that's coming down the pipe.
I think understanding taste and style is something which we thought was only the realm of humans before. I remember in 1999 seeing business models that say, I could look at this chandelier and tell you what carpet would match. And there were companies building that in 1999, and it was literally impossible. We just didn't have compute. We had the algorithms, but we didn't have available compute to do that. Today we can, and so in Etsy, the idea that out of 100 million items, you can pick earrings, and we can show you a shirt that might go well with those earrings, or style it using the power of AI, is something which we're not 100% there yet, but we're hard at work on. I'm personally excited for things like a personal avatar, so you can try things on. Each of us are built differently. And then mass customization. On Etsy, a seller can make a pair of jeans that are fit just for you. In fact, we have a wonderful denim seller based here in Detroit that makes homemade, or custom, not homemade, but custom denim jeans. But the idea that each of us can have things that are made exactly for us.
Well, your jeans do fit very well. So
thank you very much.
That is good. So it's custom, and that goes everything. Like you picking this table, you can choose the rest of the set.
Yes. And have it designed exactly for your space and the color you want.
Wow, very cool. And 30 seconds, do you have any advice for any entrepreneurs out here that want to, get going, start out, maybe change things up?
I think listening really hard to what people need. At Etsy, it wasn't handmade. It was really the search for special. When I joined Skype, everyone said free phone calls. It wasn't really free phone calls. It was being together when you can't be in the same room. And that unlocked video. When we launched video calling, it was really an extension of our mission in a more powerful way. At Evite, it wasn't about an invitation. It was about knowing who comes to the event before you commit your time to the event. So understanding the real core value you deliver and how you can do that with laser focus.
I could be up here for 6 hours with you right now. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Josh, thank you so much.
Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you, guys. Wonderful.